Good afternoon. Before I get into my presentation, I know Mr. Shivakumar and Anbuthambi for around a decade now. One thing I must have done is to schedule myself not after checks. Very, very difficult act to follow. Brief introduction about myself, apart from whatever you saw. Yes, I work with corporate affairs at Intel, and I've been there for about 8 years now. But more importantly, I'm a very, very worried parent. My son now goes to the 12th, and every day we have talks about what future holds for him. And that drives a lot of my thinking on what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, where are we in this crossroads of rapid globalization. So a lot of what I'm here to say is about where the world is going, where the jobs are going, what are the changes we are seeing in the workforce, etc. I'll also probably like to talk a little about how are we in our own small way trying to address that, right? I'm not as prescriptive as Chakrati was to tell you what needs to be done, but I hope I can contribute to your thinking evolving in this direction. So, as many of you are aware, we've seen many, many industrial revolutions so far, the first one being that of coal and steam. Then we saw manufacturing revolution. Then we saw what is called the automation revolution, which was led by computers and communications. And some of you would have been reading further. We are pretty much at the cusp of what we call the fourth industrial revolution, right? An industrial revolution where we're going to see a coming together of a fusion of all the physical, cyber, digital, biological systems. Everything that you saw in the science fiction movies while we were growing up, it's all happening around us. I read of people walking with an artificial heart in their backpack. I read of people surviving with an artificial pancreas, flying cars, amphibious cars. You name it, all that is happening. And all that is happening at a pace you and me haven't ever imagined. I'm told drone transportation, as we speak, looks a distant past, but is already getting piloted somewhere. Autonomous cars, everything that we've thought is going to happen somewhere in the future is happening now. Is that a good news? Yes. It's also a good news, but unless we gear ourselves to manage this change in one way, the divide that we have seen, the divide that we saw in the automation era of digital divide will only go furthermore, right? These are the kind of technologies that are going to hit us, the training community, the student community, etc., right? So all this is going to be a reality, merged reality, 5G connectivity, smart machines. Think of it, that's all going to be there now, right? The fourth industrial revolution is not somewhere there. It's already started. It's moving at a pace that you and me can't even imagine, while we are busy trying to address the issues of skills and jobs in the third industrial revolution. While this is happening, it's important to understand how are organizations coping and gearing for this. 70% of the organizations, irrespective of their vertical, are accounting for this change, right from their manufacturing to their customer efficiencies, to their marketing, so on and so forth, right? We see videos where people could just shop with QR codes in a very, very flat hypermarket. You know, similarly, among the top 20 industry verticals, the top tier pretty much still doesn't know the competition that's going to dislodge them from the list, right? We've seen what Amazon's done to Walmart. We've seen what Airbnb would do to a large hotel chain, right? So that plateau is also shifting very, very rapidly. Interestingly, the workforce is also moving very rapidly. By 2020, 50 to 53% of the workforce that's engaged in a gainful job would be a millennial. The reason why it's important to look at this is millennials behave differently. Their drivers are different. They learn differently. They communicate with each other differently, right? It would be a nightmare if I were an HR manager sitting in a company at 2020. I would probably have 4 or 5 generations of workforce who collaborate differently, communicate differently, learn differently, etc. I think we should take cognizance of this change that is happening. But the good news is the millennials are driven differently. Their sense of participation in community issues is larger. Their fulfillment that they seek out of the nature of company they associate themselves, the nature of job, etc., is much more than the value that they attach to salaries, right? These are something that are positives that one could look at. Now, as the fourth industrial revolution unfolds, as the nature of job change, as the nature of companies change, and as the nature of people who work in the companies change, the nature of skills are changing. They're driven by the vast changes that we see, right, around rapid systems taking over, a connected global world, so on and so forth. The nature of work is becoming, the nature of skills are becoming very, very routed to building block skills, design mindset, cognitive load management, sense making, collaboration, tinkering, etc. Is this a new concept? To me, it's not a new concept. Some leaps of this we've seen in the third industrial revolution and how workforce started getting engaged in the third industrial revolution. We've all heard of how a general sciences student with some coding abilities lapped up by an IT industry. What did they look for? They looked for building block skills like this. Therefore, what's going to be different now? The only difference I see is today there is a recognition that these are building block skills. These are skills that as academicians, as people in the associated with academia, can focus on building. Vertical skills will emerge so rapidly that we will never be able to gear to fulfill that vertical skills in our academic intervention. Another context that I would like this group to broadly know and understand is this thin line between where do people learn? How much time do they spend in a formal learning atmosphere, right? And you would notice between school to the higher education, it absolutely drops by 50%, right? So in our learning strategy, in our skilling strategy, we should account for how people interact and learn in non-formal settings and beyond formal settings, if I may. Having said that, Jack's mentioned, I think it's a well-known phenomenon that we always have this gap between what we skill people for and the roles that are out there. They have always been a massive gap, but that gap is only accentuating, right? As I speak today, I have a colleague who works in corporate affairs in the US, who works with academia, and guess what he's working on? He is working on a program to skill drone pilots. Because drone piloting is the next big, huge career opportunity in the US. Today, as last year, social media marketing was one of the huge hirers, right? I mean, hiring spaces as a skill, right? So the clarion call or a problem statement is we don't know the jobs that are going to be out there as we are attempting to skill our workforce. Leave alone all the complexities that I spoke so far about. Therefore, it's more than eminent to look at the building block skills which I showed in my previous foil. Now, while all this is happening, I just thought I would kind of take a very early stab in trying to bring this subject up, saying, is it all gloom and doom? You know, what's going to happen? What is it that we can do to proactively address some challenges around whatever we see happening? We surely can't control what's happening and the pace at which things are moving, right? We only have to see how we can gear up to manage that process better. So I've tried to see how I can put the stakeholders onto one foil, right? Government, of course, is a very large stakeholder, right? Globally, I think the governments are waking up to the fact that reality is moving faster than the pace of imagination, right? They are looking at policies, programs, building market linkages, funding linkages, etc., very, very proactively. And in the context of India, too, you've seen all the announcements, right? The Make in India, the Digital India, you know, the huge funding support that the government announced, the Atal Tinker Lab program, the Atal Innovation Mission program. Why do you see all this? You see all this because for a demographic like India, the government knows that they can never, ever skill and match people to jobs. It's impossible because the demographic is growing at a certain pace. Therefore, a culture of entrepreneurship is sought to be pushed. So from that perspective, this is a global phenomena, and I must admit, I see the government taking nearly all the right steps in that direction. From an academia perspective, and I think what needs to be, or what is getting done, in fact, around lunch, I was speaking to someone from an institution very close to where I reside. While I drive past, I see a huge hoarding that has logos of nearly everybody in our ecosystem, right? So I think the academia has really opened up to the potential of partnerships, which is very, very welcome sign, but more can be done in that space. If you realize that the jobs of tomorrow are not what you know, you will not go after skilling people for that job. If you realize that the pace at which jobs are changing are much, much faster than the pace at which your curriculum can be adopted, you would then embrace an open learning atmosphere to say, okay, these are building block skills that I'm focusing on. This is one aspect I differ from a previous speaker. Then call to action partnerships. There are many, many resources out there, many agencies out there, many curricula out there that can come in to complement some of the work that you're doing. Yesterday, I was in a meeting with the CEO of one of the mid-sized organizations. She and me were talking about how there is a direct correlation between students working with their hands and their innovation quotient. The more we get into rote over the past so many decades, the less our ability to tinker has become. Therefore, the less our ability to fix something that's broken has become. Therefore, less our ability to innovate has become. So I would request people in the room to see how they can make avenues for more of tinkering, hands-on, making, etc., as a skill to come around in their students. I'll talk about the youth next, right? I think culturally, India is waking up to entrepreneurship as a good alternate career path, right? So youth need to embrace growth mindset. Youth need to embrace entrepreneurship as a plank because they will never have as many jobs out there which are more fulfilling than what they could achieve as a potential in entrepreneurship. The second thing is, given the nature of beast, and given the nature of jobs that are moving so rapidly, they should openly embrace lifelong learning, learning beyond their academics, and continuing to hold forth. Thirdly, all the aspects that the previous speaker mentioned, right? How do they become a global citizen? How do they become a cross-cultural citizen? Those are things that a student or a youth, if I may, I'm going beyond student, a youth would want to focus on. While all this is happening, industry has a very, very important role, if I may, because industry has a vantage from where they see change coming, right? So people like us should look at that, from that vantage, should look at early warnings of the signs that are coming and look at how can there be, if not very, very large scaled out initiative, at least programs and interventions which are directional in nature for academia, for government, so on and so forth. Industry also needs to look at how do they embrace new age hiring practices than what currently is, right? The West is already, there are organizations in West who just ask you to come for a hack and they make an offer to somebody who's the best hacker perhaps. Things like that have to come in. And also create a culture for millennials to thrive, right? Now, last week I was reading that while a company like Intel has had a very, very critical role to play in technology acceleration, right? I'm given to understand the Moore's law, which some of you may know, which we've been tracking since 1970, has a cadence of about 2 years. A couple of years back, there was a lot of write-up on, is it becoming 2.5 years, right? So every 2 years, for those of you who don't know, what you can do with a chip in terms of the power or efficiency, etc., goes 2x because the number of transistors potentially go 2x. And this cadence is once in 2 years. I was reading a couple of weeks back, if that cadence were to be once in 3 years, we would have had the first smartphone sometime today. We would have had the e-com revolution 2 years down the line. We would have had a social media revolution 3-4 years down the line. So we recognize that we have played a part in accelerating some of these things, right? This chaos, which is helpful in some way, is accelerated by industry like us too. Therefore, we believe as the fourth industrial revolution comes, this gap will only get wider, right? We are going to leave a footprint of youth who are not going to be skilled optimally to participate in the fourth industrial revolution. Mind you, everybody will participate in the fourth industrial revolution. The point is, do people participate in it as a user or as an innovator? It's a choice that we can drive, right? To drive that, we are currently, globally and in India, working on a program called Intel Innovation Generation, where we are trying to see how the youth of today can get access to innovation as a skill. How can we have a program that helps in bridging the innovation skill divide among youth in India? And that cuts across various youth age groups, right? So we have something called Intel Future Skills, something for the makers, something for the higher education segment, so on and so forth. I'd like to take just one example. I didn't want to talk a lot about the whole program per se, but I'd like to talk about the Intel Future Skills program, right? So like I said, it's important for kids to get their hands and tinker and get it right. So earlier last year, we had a strategic alliance with partnership with Niti Aayog in helping them set up the Tinker Labs, right? There are 500 Tinker Labs that they're setting up. So we've set up 10, and you would notice we've picked up places which are very, very hard to go. So we have something in Trivandrum, we have something in Guwahati and Jodhpur, if I may. So we're trying to see how we can truly go to the disenfranchised, non-included audience in the last mile and build tinkering skills. And as part of our association with Niti, we're looking at how do we bring about a world-class curriculum, how do we provide the right tinkering atmosphere in terms of infrastructure, how do we give them soft infrastructures like training, etc. With the promise of what? With the promise of not skilling the youth. With the promise of saying we will skill the youth and we will demonstrate a path to how technology can truly go and meet the community. To me, skilling is just a midpoint, right? So we need to go beyond to see how technology can help the community. Now, this is one true way I think we can democratize innovation. I have a small video of what the impact of such intervention can look like, and I would look forward to partnerships across the verticals that I spoke about to see how we can bridge this innovation divide in India. Can I request the video, please?
38 kilometers from the capital city of New Delhi is the small, underdeveloped town of Bhuvana. The population is characterized by low income and rising day-to-day livelihood issues. From limited government schools and poor civic infrastructure to lack of sufficient electricity supply and clean water, the town is faced with several social challenges. On the other hand, Bhuvana has its fair share of bright minds, ready to make their town a better place to live through the power of innovation.
ये इंटेल क्यूरी बोर्ड है, इसका पता है क्या क्या फंक्शन था? हमने लास्ट टाइम इस पर प्रोजेक्ट बनाया था।
हाँ, इससे हम मतलब ये इससे बात कर सकते हैं,
अलग अलग सेंसर से बात कर सकता है, ये अलग अलग आउटपुट दे सकता है, हम इसे प्रोग्राम कर सकते हैं, ठीक है ना। और आपके प्रोजेक्ट में हमने
My name is Maisar. My name is Rosie. My name is Nazma. हम सब भवाना जे कॉलोनी में रहते हैं। नवज्योति इंडिया फाउंडेशन में इंटेल टेक चैलेंज वर्कशॉप हुआ, जिसमें हमने इंटेल क्यूरी बोर्ड और सेंसर के बारे में जाना।
हमारा जो मोहल्ला है उसमें यह प्रॉब्लम है कि जो नल है उसमें पानी आता है, लोग उसे भरते हैं तथा उसका इस्तेमाल करते हैं, परंतु उन लोगों को यह नहीं पता चल पाता कि पानी पीने लायक है या नहीं। इसलिए हमने वाटर प्योरिटी मॉनिटरिंग डिवाइस बनाया है, जिससे हम पता लगाएंगे कि पानी पीने लायक है या नहीं।
इसमें हमने इंटेल क्यूरी बोर्ड, LCD और PS सेंसर का उपयोग किया है।
ये पीएच सेंसर, जब हम इस पीएच सेंसर को पानी के साथ अटैच करते हैं तो इस मॉनिटरिंग पे दिखाई देता है कि यह पानी पीने लायक नहीं है।
मेरा नाम नीरज है और मैं जे कॉलोनी भवाना में रहता हूँ।
मेरा नाम फैसल है, मैं भवाना जे कॉलोनी में रहता हूँ। मैंने अपने क्षेत्र में अल्कोहल की वजह से काफ़ी एक्सीडेंट होते हुए देखा है।
हमने अपने मेंटर द्वारा एक मॉडल डिज़ाइन किया है जिसका नाम है अल्कोहल डिटेक्ट डिवाइस, जिसमें एक MQ3 सेंसर लगा है जो अल्कोहल को डिटेक्ट करेगा कि किस इंसान ने कितना अल्कोहल पी रखा है। जैसा कि आप देख सकते हैं इस बोर्ड की केवल एक LED जल रही है, इसका मतलब ये है कि ये काम कर रहा है। जैसे मैं इस DO को अल्कोहल सेंसर पे डालूंगा तो इस बोर्ड की सारी LED जल जाएगी। हम दोनों ये चाहते हैं कि ये डिवाइस गाड़ियों में लगे और अगर कोई भी व्यक्ति अल्कोहल पी के गाड़ी चलाने की कोशिश करेगा तो ये अल्कोहल डिटेक्ट करके गाड़ी स्टार्ट नहीं होने देगा, जिसके कारण काफ़ी हद तक दुर्घटनाओं से बचा जा सकता है।
So what you just saw is what our vision of really democratizing innovation would look like. So we do this across schools, we do this across higher education institutions, so on and so forth. My only request for us as a group to gear up to solve the issues of fourth industrial revolution is, as in past we've been talking to learning groups as primary, secondary, higher secondary, etc. We should slowly get on to a culture of calling them tinkerers, makers, innovators, and entrepreneurs, because that is extremely powerful, and only that will allow India to deliver on the vision of Make in India, solve India's own problems, and usher India into the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you.